Hi, welcome to Looking Forward with Jack Barron. We are today exploring the future of climate tech. My name is Chris Carpenter. I work with the marketing team at For ClimateTech. And with me today is the managing director, Jack Barron. Jack, could you dive in a little bit of talking about the program and what it does?
Sure, Chris. So For ClimateTech is a global accelerator or a studio accelerator where we help companies from around the world scale up to the next level. They tend to be pre-seed and seed companies, which means they're very early stage. And they're innovations in climate and energy space. We're funded by NYSERDA, which is wonderful because we're a not-for-profit. And we've based the program on quite a few of the best accelerators out there in the country. It's a 6-month program, and we've been very successful. Over 1,100 companies have applied for the program in the past 3 years for just 42 spots. This year it was 20 companies that came through the program. We had 298 apply this year. And quite a few of those companies have gone on for additional funding, some by really large, well-known climate organizations.
Very cool to hear. So you must, talking about all the numbers of climate tech companies you work with, what were some of the defining climate technologies you observed over this past year working with your cohort?
It's been an exciting year, and we're really pretty broad. So global greenhouse gas impact is really the first criteria we look at. So which companies are going to actually be able to have the largest impact for the planet and for folks in New York State. We're funded by NYSERDA, as I mentioned, so it's really the folks who pay the electric bills in New York State who are funding us. And so battery storage has been one key area. So for not only electric vehicles, but even grid and microgrid storage, that's been a big focus. We had quite a few applicants and several companies come through the program in that space. Solar continues to evolve. So we had one company out of MIT, brilliant, really a new thin film solar panel that's 1/120th the weight of conventional solar panels with comparable energy output. Revolutionary chemistry is very big. So we had two companies, one based in Israel and one based in North Jersey. And these folks actually have, one of them has the ability to take demolition cement. So as you tear down a building or a building comes down, cement is separated from the rest of the debris. And it's a chemical process that takes that powderized cement, the rubble, and really turns it into reusable cement that's stronger than the original cement.
Oh, wow.
So, and cement, believe it or not, is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases, I guess roughly 8% globally. And then the Jersey company, that's a technology that's now patented based on some original technology that was done over decades and decades in the former Soviet Union. And this technology is for a high-density gypsum. So you think gypsum, you think drywall, you can put your arm through it. This is about almost 15 times the strength of concrete. And it's highly water-resistant, also reusable, much like the technology out of Israel. And then, of course, artificial intelligence, machine learning is part of the focus in the companies this year. One that helps data centers reduce their energy use, and data centers, as AI grows, is actually kind of a huge frontier for the growth of data and computing. And one company that has developed AI and algorithms, of course, think Google, around the identification of nitrous oxide coming out of wastewater treatment plants. And they actually have pilots now around the world to reduce that nitrous oxide, which is a terrible greenhouse gas, and they're quite successful. So really a pretty broad spectrum, including things for EV chargers that'll help folks who are buying an electric vehicle, and the grid companies that are trying to manage the amount of electricity that they now have to begin to respond to as a result of the growth of the EV industry.
Wow. So a truly wide range of different technologies. And, each of those, emerging technologies trying to get to market is a difficult thing. I'd be curious, what are some of the common obstacles you see and that you might have seen in cohort 3 with all these different teams? I mean, I'm sure it's unique per technology, but was there any overlap?
There was. There are some pretty consistent patterns. So as folks who are close to the startup or entrepreneurial communities, in particular in the US, but these are even global trends, in 2023, a lot of the issue has been funding. Now, in climate, thankfully, not simply as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is fantastic, by the way, for climate and energy startups, truly fantastic, but just from the venture capital community in general, and regular investors. Climate is huge. I mean, it's jobs, it's real technology, it's industry, it's growth, it's profitability.
We know that, your team, you support a lot of these teams and provide a lot of different resources. My question for you is, what of those resources is the most valuable to the teams? Like I know you do the funding, mentoring, connections, investor connections. There has to be, was there one that stood out from the other when you're looking at the cohort companies?
For sure. So we survey them. We ask them, of course, as we go along, because it's a long process, 6 months, although they're kind of like children where, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, you never let your children go, really, in some ways. And so we have relationships still with the first cohort and second cohort companies. We're still helping them get investment and still in close communication with them as well. So we don't really want to let these folks go, because it's all about, the greater fight of really addressing climate change, mitigating climate change. And so that's why we're all in this. So mentorship, to answer your question directly, because in the surveys, that's what comes back. They love the hands-on problem-solving, mentoring, and which also includes access to our networks. So we have and continue to grow access to investor networks and entrepreneurs in residence. NYSERDA, our funding partner, has a tremendous program and have had for years. Entrepreneurs in residence that's been associated with Columbia University historically. So tremendously skilled, experienced people who actually directly help mentor our companies, in addition to the mentorship we have internally.
Interesting. Even more than the cash. It always surprises me.
Yeah, I think much more important than the cash. We have, non-dilutive cash, which is exciting, of course. But everybody wants, all startups want some non-dilutive, meaning it doesn't take equity away from the founders or the shareholders. So it's like a grant is a good way to look at it. And we have a fairly significant amount of capital available for these companies, depending on how well they do through the program and how well they do with outside investment as well. But I think the cash in some ways is almost the least important, because it's really helping them scale, which means our focus is how do we help them laser focus in on what we call their beachhead market that they're going to go to market with to get their first cash flow and get their first successes, which helps them build their company, of course. How do they laser focus in on that? And we help them create that market opportunity gap sink. And then how do they prepare to actually go out and communicate about that with investors and prospective investors? And then we connect them with the investment community as well.
So taking a step back here, I want to kind of pick your brain looking at the innovations of 2024 and what we have looking forward. So from your perspective as managing director of Venture for ClimateTech, what new technologies do you think will be kind of the defining technologies of the upcoming year?
A great question. So AI continues to be, it's not just a hot button. It's not just a talking point. It's real. I mean, it's machine learning. It's even baby steps with AI is kind of the way I like to look at it. So for example, one company, Fluix, in our current cohort, they're working with data centers to reduce the amount of energy that data centers are consuming. I kind of alluded to their technology a little earlier. So it is AI and it's ever evolving. So you're going to see much more AI come into areas like grid storage and microgrids. Microgrids are growing quickly it's taken a while, but they're really finally now rapidly being deployed to take advantage of renewables and some new storage technologies that are coming out, which also could benefit tremendously from AI. So those are kind of the three areas. It's AI, it's grid and storage, and even microgrids, which I think are going to be increasingly big for all of us as we move forward. You think about EVs and storage in general, some of the evolution, some of the technology evolution that's happening right now with storage, small scale storage, when you think cell phones or you think cars, which are reasonably small scale, compared to grid storage or microgrid. If you're thinking about a small community where you've got a hospital, school, a whole bunch of people living and some businesses, the microgrid that could be associated with that, of course, requires storage, but it could be large scale storage, like some of the storage coming out of MIT that has the size of a football field buried underground based on aluminum, for example. And just some of the researchers at MIT who are doing work with aluminum bauxite have invented technology that actually is extremely large scale, grid scale technology using one of the most abundant minerals on the planet, aluminum. So it's cheap, which is kind of nice. So you're not worried about rare earth metals like lithium and so forth that are impractically unavailable or less available or expensive and so forth. And so I see a lot of technology evolving there.
And you kind of talk about the importance of scale. And then you have your own personal experience from your time with Sweetwater, kind of scaling a larger company. So do you have, I guess, what was instrumental to the ability to scaling, for technology to scale from your perspective, or to that success?
That's a great question. So experience at Sweetwater, and then even before that, we scaled, PayTech from 3 people to over 5,000, and so we got from 0 revenues to over $2 billion. So the story was, in terms of the reason we were successful at both, with PayTech really in terms of getting to first product, customer, personnel, employee scale, and then revenue and eventually profitability, EBITDA earnings scale, and even public scale in that case, was the team. It all came back to the team. We had a remarkable team at that company. There were 12 of us on the senior management team. I was president there, one of the 3 co-founders, but president there all my time and chief marketing officer. We had everyone on that team, all 12, very diverse team, really skilled. Our chief counsel, the folks running operations, the folks running IT, on and on and on. Just an extraordinary, diverse, powerful team together making democratic decisions because our CEO liked a really democratic board at that time. And the reason we were successful at Sweetwater, at least in terms of getting the technology to scale to commercial scale successfully with a remarkable facility in Europe, still the leading biorefining technology for biofuels on the globe, that doesn't use food as a feedstock because we're using waste products predominantly from crop residues. The reason that technology was successful in getting to commercial scale also came back to the team.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I feel like scale is so many of those words that the investors like to hear that they want to know about scaling to commercialization, which kind of I wanted to jump down to, recently investment trends in early stage companies have been down, at least from the past couple of years. And I was curious, from your perspective in the investor world, what appetites you're seeing out there for investors for early stage kind of companies.
Another great question. So the evolution for us at Venture for ClimateTech over the last 3 years, I've only been here a little less than a year, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm studying the first 2 cohorts. It's gotten better and better, Chris. That's kind of the most remarkable.
That's funny.
thing.
So it's kind of going opposite with the trend.
Yeah, and now some of it is the fact that I think as our recruiting process improves and our selection process improves, we're selecting companies that are much more likely to eventually become successful because of the technology they're bringing to the table, but also the team they're bringing to the table, because you're not going to have any impact on climate unless you've got a strong team.
Yeah.
And that means a team that's open-minded, coachable, smart, obviously, and passionate about their technology. Great technology, great team. That's what makes it happen. Well, those folks are investable. And so we've had 12 out of the first 20 get significant investment. A few were oversubscribed based on the rounds they were seeking.
All right.
So they actually got more investment than they were seeking originally. And they're all on a nice path. So very encouraging. Again, the Inflation Reduction Act that passed Congress in a bipartisan fashion, I might add, last year, huge in terms of making a difference and making America more competitive in the climate space and New York State more competitive. And that's part of the reason all these folks globally are attracted to places like New York State and the U.S.
As Venture for ClimateTech is kind of transitioning into the next cohort and starting up its recruitment efforts, I was curious, what technologies do you expect to see in the next cycle?
So what we're seeing already is, interestingly, manufacturing a lot of materials. So some of the first folks that are actually applying already, extremely advanced composite materials, lighter weight, more efficient, to allow, say, for example, drones and cargo aircraft, and eventually even manned aircraft, human aircraft, think passenger planes potentially, and things as kind of far-reaching as jet engines, turbines, lighter weight, stronger, longer lasting, more efficient. And turbines are kind of interesting because we're actually looking at a turbine company right now for cohort 4, where you think turbines for jet engines, of course, but also when you think about compression. So if you need to eventually have hydrogen, for example, compressed for transportation, you want to be able to ultra compress it using turbines. And so that's one application we're looking at with that particular company. So I think when you think grid, microgrid, artificial intelligence, those will be some of the big areas. But then kind of based on the earlier conversation, we're getting them from all sectors. We'll have some wind, we'll have some solar. Really, I know we're going to have electric vehicles, EVs in general. Storage will still be big. And we follow the impact. So that's really the number one criteria.
Interesting. That makes sense.
So it's the technology impact again, and going back to the potential for the team and their likelihood for success based on how strong they are and how coachable they are.
As you're gathering up these new recruitment, you're getting these new applicants in, what makes a ClimateTech startup stand out to you?
I think the first thing that you become aware of when you're dealing with these early stage companies is their passion for the solution they have.
Okay.
So they're bringing a solution that they know. They've been dealing with the problem, recognized a large problem, oftentimes a huge gap that's out there in the world, in the marketplace, and they have a solution. They've spent a lot of time thinking about the solution. They've spent a surprising amount thinking about competitive solutions and where theirs fits. And then they've gone to the extreme work of getting that to be somewhat market ready, or in some cases even better than that, to almost to a pilot stage or pilot ready. And they've built a team already, typically a robust team of brilliant folks. I mean, that's one of the really cool things about our job.
That's a good thing to get you out of bed in the morning, I guess.
It is. It is.
This next question is more kind of looking back at the climate crisis as a whole, and it can be broad. What gaps do you see that need to be filled in order us to speed up these innovations to actually make an impact on climate?
So I would love to see us as a nation, put political differences aside as much as possible and kind of go back to the founding of the country, where we worked through differences, through compromise and agreement, and focusing on moving things forward collectively for the betterment of all of us.
Yeah.
I think that's key. That said, that's kind of a nirvana hope. But in terms of what we could do, as you look at the disasters that are occurring, and obviously you have to have immediate response, there are actually some technologies out there that we've actually dealt with in this particular cohort that do have the ability to have immediate response. For example, working with one technology that think Nikolai Tesla, not Elon Musk Tesla, but back to Nikolai Tesla, who had been working on methods to transmit electricity through the airwaves. And of course, your first thought is, oh my gosh, that sounds pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it sounds like a good way to get hurt.
It sounds like or to hurt some wildlife, right? But in reality, they've actually put safeties into this particular technology where you could actually put your hand in front of it and it stops the beam immediately and that type of thing. And so they spent a lot of time and focus on that. But there are all sorts of reasons that could help in a disaster situation. Think an island. I won't name names, but think an island where a hurricane hits and you have to get communications up or electricity up right away to really help. I mean, it would work extremely well with FEMA and other organizations, or even the military, to help reestablish electricity and get people back in business for homes and hospitals. That's exciting. But then you also think about one of the companies out of MIT that we're working with, Active Surfaces. These folks are brilliant, and they have developed this thin film technology that I referenced earlier.
Yeah.
So you think about the potential for that to go, they could literally roll out solar cells like a yoga mat.
Wow.
Huge yoga mats. Think about it that way, from the top roof of onto a football field or onto the roof of a warehouse, or actually even coat the top of a bus or a truck or a backyard and provide enough electricity to get things up and running really quickly. And that's exciting. So I think when you think about climate disasters and how much we're all paying attention to that now, there are actual technologies that are coming out that can help affect that. And then it goes back to microgrids. With a lot of microgrids, there's a lot more protection and diversification in the grid itself, storage being a crucial element there. And that's the evolution that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a lot of money, though. The capital investment in this space over the next 10, 20, 30 years, 50 years probably, is going to be enormous.
Wow. So this will be my final question. But what kind of things do you find actually helpful when trying to speed up innovation?
So I guess when I think about it from an individual standpoint or a company standpoint, I think about open-mindedness and collaboration as being the things that are actually helpful. So people working together, with a common goal. That's actually true when you get into the capital community too, for venture, for funding. Open-mindedness, willingness to actually problem solve together and make a difference that way. Those are the things that are most helpful. The other piece is getting the word out. One of the things that our folks in our communications group, including yourself, have been instrumental in doing is helping to communicate broadly to the world that, hey, there are these great programs like Venture for ClimateTech, like Scale for ClimateTech, and so forth. And there are many of them around the country, around the world. There are some of these extraordinary programs. Come on in, take a look at these programs, apply, actually get involved. And that includes not only the folks who are applying to actually take part in the program as the entrepreneurs themselves, but mentors and funders and people and partners, who want to actually help move this cause forward. We need a lot of help. And fortunately, we've got a lot of help. We can always use more.
Perfect. Could always use more help. Well, Jack, thanks so much for letting us pick your brain and get some insight on what's going on in the world of climate tech.
A pleasure, Chris. Thank you.